Hello and welcome to Through Dangers Untold, a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of the classic fantasy film Labyrinth. I'm your host, as always, Elwood Jones, and joining me, of course, is the one and only Miss Emily Slade.
Hello!
I felt that was like trailing off then. So that's very...
Yeah, I did like a bit with the mic where I was like up close and then really far away.
Very clever.
Drama school.
It's all paying off now.
Yeah.
Tonight we bring you not one, but two chapters, as we're going to be looking at the chapters Left or Right and The Worm.
Whoop whoop.
Obviously on our previous episode we hung out with Jay from the Deep Blue Sea podcast, and we talked about Hoggle and learned many interesting opinions that the world has about Hoggle. I've yet to have any clarification from you, our listeners, on which side you lot all stand, but that was a fun episode to record, so if you haven't done already, do check it out. And also hit the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening to us, as it all helps raise the profile of the show. Tonight, though, we are now actually finally in the Labyrinth. As of the end of last week's episode, we threw open the doors and we're now into the Labyrinth, and I have to say, a little bit of a disappointment for those big gates just to find ourselves in an alleyway.
I beg to differ. No, I think it's awesome.
I'm waiting for this amazing retort now.
No, the retort is just like, I disagree, I quite like it. I really like that it's a very simple opening, because the idea is that it's a labyrinth, so as we twist and turn, we're going to get more and more elaborate within the labyrinth. But to begin with, it's a very just simple glitter-infested corridor. Just very plain walls. It's like when you're doing like a video game, and the first level is quite like, you know, in Sonic, you start off in the like green zone, and then the
Green
next
hell,
time you're in like something slightly different, and then the next time you're doing something slightly different. It's like that. She's Sonic. Sarah is Sonic, and we're in the wall zone with the brick walls and the glitter trees. And there's so much going on. It's so like detailed, and they've really thought about every part of the labyrinth, and this part is no exception, because whilst it may not have the glamour and depth of later segments, the walls are covered in these sort of like almost dead. Like as we get closer and closer to the Goblin City, we get more and more lush and green. But we're on the outskirts here, so it's quite dead, and everything. It's like Legend, which I read just now that they were filming next door, Legend 1985 with Tim Curry and Tom Cruise, one of the greatest movies ever made, was filming next door. And so they must have all just like shipped in a shit ton of glitter and just put it on everything, because she's stepping over branches that are covered in glitter, pulling off twigs on the wall that's covered in glitter, and it's just really good, because you know you're in this magical labyrinth, but it's quite tame to begin with, and it's a really good starting point for our heroine as well, to get to grips with this sort of nothing's what it seems. You're taking everything for granted. And the interesting things that they've got in this section are little puppets that are basically moss on your finger with an eyeball stuck on the end of it, sticking out through the wall, and like watching her go through, and they're all like, oh. So you instantly as well get this idea that everything's alive and the walls literally have eyes, and you know, it sets up these stakes and this tension, and I really like it, and it's very atmospheric when she first goes in with the mist, and she's like looking around, and then Hoggle gives her a bit of a fright. I do have to say, he's like, you take too many things for granted. And I still don't think I really understand what he means by that. What do you think he means by that?
I'm trying to remember the context in which he says it now.
She's like, let me see if I can quote this. Give me a sec. This is the thing. It's very bizarre. She says something like, left. He's like, left or right? And she's like, I don't know. Which way would you go? And he's like, me? I wouldn't go either way. And she's like, if that's all the help you're going to be, you can just leave. And he says, you know what your problem is? You take too many things for granted. And, like, it doesn't seem to come from anything. It doesn't really make sense in the context of the conversation. But then she says... I think it's... something cool. Yeah, sorry, what do you think she's...
I was just about to say, in Hoggle's way, that he's, he is being helpful, but Hoggle's way is just a very difficult way. But then again, it seems to be very much in the tone of how everyone in the Labyrinth speaks. True. It's kind of like a dialect.
But
everyone speaks in this sort of riddle-ish tone, even like the worm who we're going to meet in a bit.
Yeah. I don't know what it means. Like, what do you mean I'm taking it for granted? Like, I just can't get my head around that sentence. Like, what am I taking for granted? Because then later on she's like, they call it a labyrinth, but there's no turnings or twists or anything. It just goes on and on. And then she's like, maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm just taking it for granted that it does. And it's like, what? You're taking it for granted that the labyrinth just goes on and on. That's not something you would take for granted. That's something you're just experiencing in your current state of being. I don't know. I never quite understood the turn of phrase there. And they keep trying to, like, wheel it back in. And I'm always like, is that what we mean? Is that what we're trying to say? I don't know. But in response to the original comment, Sarah goes, that's your opinion. And much like come on feet, it was a little earworm that I was like, nice, noted, taken, mine now. So all of my life I've been like, that's your opinion. She says it really cool. It's really fun to listen to.
In my head, I'd already rewritten it, that when he closes the door behind her, that her next line was, come on feet.
Yeah.
In my head, I've rewritten the whole script. So they were sort of like, come on feet, and then she starts tracking. And then she has that little moment of doubt where it's sort of like, maybe I just got to go further along. Because, it's a big old labyrinth. So maybe I just need to go a fair bit. Because it would make no sense just to have a turn straight off. So maybe I just need to go a little bit further down. And then I hit a turn or a corner or something. Because it's not like a world labyrinth.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what she assumes. And
right.
I love the fact that even though we've only got a small amount of corridor, that we put in a few little details, and it seems that we got an ongoing corridor.
Yeah.
And all we're basically having to do is run back and forth over the same few feet of set.
Of a set with the perspective picture in the background. So good.
Yeah, a nice map painting in the background.
I love it.
And I love it. Again, you mentioned already about the moss with the eyes, because Jareth is always watching.
And I never got the impression that was Jareth. I feel he's pretty omnipotent.
No, he's little followers.
But it's just really fun to know that there's always, like, the labyrinth is alive with creatures. Things live here. Like, the labyrinth is like a world in itself. Like, people live in the walls. People live under the paving stones. The plant life is different to what you would get on Earth. It's its own, like, ecosystem. Like, it's just its own perfect little place with its own inhabitants. And I think that's set up here, and it's really lovely. What also is set up here is the running gag of Hoggle's name. Because just before he leaves, she says, thanks for nothing, Hogwart. And he goes, oh, it's Hoggle. And don't you forget it. And then everyone immediately forgets it. And we'll start to see that as a running gag. And it's established here, which is really nice. And then he shuts the door without touching the doors. And again, as like a 13-year-old, I was like, magic. Like, it's just really satisfying to have him. And this is the thing, it's the juxtaposition. Because up until this point, every time I'd seen magic in a movie, I'd seen it where it had taken a lot of, like, concentration, focus, effort, or just, like, intensity, where people had been like, I'm doing magic now. But to see Hoggle, like, grumpily leave the labyrinth and just wave his arms behind him, like, ugh, to shut the doors, and the doors like close on their own. It was that juxtaposition of like casual, like I just live with magic. Like I can just open the doors and close the doors of the labyrinth without touching them. Like obviously, yeah, it's magic, but we don't care because this is the labyrinth and magic is everywhere. And that was really exciting to me as a kid. And I'll talk about that more later on when we get to certain scenes. Like this movie is just full of so many magic moments for me. One that I've talked about it so many times before, but it took my breath away, and I'm so pumped to get to it. And like this was the first one of those things where he just casually shut the doors without touching them, and you're like, it's so good.
Yeah, I just thought they were automated doors, you know, like
no, because it's like
the fact that there's so much of the labyrinth is leaving.
Obviously, they're not
but it
automated.
doesn't mean that.
Obviously, they are automated in real life, but we're in the labyrinth.
The doors have a life of themselves. They're like, you know, the false warnings.
So good.
But no, I
sorry.
I just never thought too much about how Hogwarts closes the door until you obviously mentioned it.
The thing about this movie, man, like every single second, I'm like, perfect, brilliant, genius, for these hundreds of reasons. The soundtrack is like so synthy and fun. It's like ominous, but also like adventurous. And it picks up the pace when she picks up the pace. And it's just a brilliant little undercurrent to the moment before she fucking freaks out because she cannot find a turning anywhere. And there's a really brilliant bratty like hit against the wall, kick against the wall. Before slumping down and being like, fuck, man. Like, this sucks. Like, I'm never going to get my fucking brother back. And then we meet possibly the most famous, next to Jareth, character within the Labyrinth. Do you think?
I'm not sure we got that far. I mean, it's certainly a memorable character. It's also a character I thought was female until about 5 minutes before we came on to record.
What? Why?
So, the way it's styled, its look and everything. It's got its hair tied up in the
you just assumed there was like a lovely little gay marriage happening at the opening of the
I didn't even register like the fact that he says come in and meet the missus. Probably, as I said, they wouldn't have avoided. As I said, because the accent, it felt sounding female.
Make that canon now. That worm is a woman, and we have a little LGBTQ plus community on the outskirts of the labyrinth. It's canon now.
Do you know what the worm's called?
William, because I saw your tweet.
Yeah. Well, there goes my big reveal for the evening.
You can cut that out and do the reveal if you want.
Let's just re-record that, but with more emphasis. Okay. So the name of the worm is William.
Ah.
Yeah, I see those acting lessons really paid off.
I'm still fucking paying for them.
Oh my god.
So, like, the worm is the thing that, like, Labyrinth is, and let me just go on a tangent, so stick with me here. Labyrinth is one of those things that is massively cult and popular, so it has a decent amount of merchandise, but when we compare it to something like the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, we have nowhere near enough merchandise. And the merchandise is getting better as the years go on, but it's still quite bland and basic. Now, we'll put a pin in that and come back to it, re the worm, but just to go off on one, obviously there are talks of a Labyrinth 2, which makes my skin itch, and I will not be watching it in case anyone wondered or cared. And unless you pay me. And I feel like how Jurassic World pumped up the merchandise for Jurassic Park, but in a twisted way, because all the merch then said Jurassic World instead of Park. It will do it for this, so they will catch up with the merchandise and they will jump on that as a thing to make money from, but the merchandise will be twisted because it will all be from Labyrinth 2, a project that will have neither Bowie or Henson attached to it. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the merchandise in that respect. But just to go back to what it's happening at the moment, shout out to truffleshuffle.com. Like, this isn't a paid advert, I just really fucking love them. That's where most of my Labyrinth merchandise comes from. And they've got some really great stuff, some really like out of the ordinary stuff, subtle stuff, which is my favorite kind of merchandise. But so often within the merchandising of Labyrinth, the worm is the most prominent thing. Like, you can get that fucking worm on anything. You want a doormat? Have the worm. You want a coaster? Have the worm. You want a mug? Here's the worm. And what really entertains me about this is that this worm, as charming as he may be within the context of the movie, is fucking ugly. Like, it's so horrific.
Don't say that.
When it's transferred onto merchandise. Like, unless it's a cute little crocheted worm from Etsy.com, and if you head to our Instagram page, our story at the moment, I've shared a bunch of really cool cosplay for the worm and some like little crocheted bits of the worm. But, you know, like everything else that I've seen with this worm on, they've tried to copy its like bulbous face and its like faded blue body. And it just looks like, I was going to say Frankenstein's monster, but I've seen a hell of a lot of Frankenstein's monsters that look better than this worm. Like, it just doesn't translate well to being slapped onto like slippers, you know?
No. There's a few things in the fantastical realm which don't translate that you would think would. Adipose being another.
Which one, sorry?
For some reason, people could not replicate an adipose when they try and crochet it or do anything else with it. So that's a Doctor Who thing.
Oh, I was going to say, I was like, nothing is computing in my brain. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
What is it?
So, it's a Doctor Who thing. It's a little monster that's made out of fat. But they were introduced in like one episode, and then they became this reoccurring background thing.
Yeah, they look like little pillows with like eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cute.
The first
plush
episode
toys.
of Doctor Who.
Can't imagine they look great on anything else.
Okay. Well, the first episode of Doctor Who I ever showed my wife back when we were courting was that episode, and that's why they're on my wedding cake.
Ah, that's adorable.
Along with Mulder and Scully. And then more randomly, our wedding cake turned up randomly on some awesome wedding cakes thread. Like, we had not put pictures on like the internet or anything, just like on our Facebook page. And then randomly it started appearing. So whether the cake maker had put it up somewhere.
Submitted it.
And it was so like, that's my wedding cake.
That's my wedding cake. Can I have some royalties, please?
I just had a few interesting conversations with people about how much they like my wedding cake, but
oh, that's awesome. I'm never getting married, but I might commission a wedding cake.
Married, but
no, but I'm just thinking like I might make a wedding cake for myself. Just get one made.
Yeah.
Because
be like Sue Sylvester on Glee and marry yourself.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a fruit cake, it does. If you have like a sponge cake, it's not gonna
Emma Watson
last.
coined the term self-partnered. That's where we're at.
Did she now?
I think she's in a relationship now. Traitor. But it's fine. So the worm is British.
A dance move.
It is. It's also British.
It's got a very Yorkshire accent though to it.
I always
That's
thought
why
it was Cockney.
I look at that face. Cockney? It is Cockney, although I sort of associate it with being northern, obviously being from Manchester. So a lot of the dialogue and the is it equilisms, the mannerisms of it, of how it talks, just felt very of the hometown. And it doesn't surprise me really, seeing as Terry Jones was involved in the script, and that you would have a Cockney-esque worm.
Yeah, it's just a fun sort of accent to go into, isn't it? I've seen quite a few American TV shows that when a character is trying to be like awkward or funny, they'll do like a Cockney accent as like a joke. And it's like, it's just a satisfying accent to slip into, because it's, you know, famously bad by my God, I was going to say Danny DeVito then. What the hell is his name? Bert from
Dick
Mary
Van Dyke.
Poppins. Yes. Now I want to see a version of Mary Poppins with Danny DeVito playing Bert.
Yeah.
But Julie Andrews still plays Mary Poppins. I want
it. The problem is that I get the impression that a lot of people in the States believe that Downton Abbey is a documentary.
Yeah, and The Crown is a documentary.
You ask anyone like what as English folks sound like, they either go for like super posh, so like Mary Poppins, or they go Cockney.
Yeah,
those are the only two accents we have apparently.
The Mary Poppins covered them all. They covered the basics. You've got the Queen or Bert. But it's good. It works, and it's it's such a famous line. Like this one's a real popular one for tattoos as well. If you scroll through Instagram, you'll see a lot of worm tattoos, and it's so. Whenever you talk to Labyrinth and people that don't really know much about Labyrinth or don't care, like they all know. Hello. Did you say hello? No, I said hello. That's close enough. Like everybody knows that line. Like everybody knows it. And it's funny because as a kid, I was like, huh. Like it didn't stay with me. Where other things that are perhaps more random did. I was always just like, funny, cute, like it, but like not gonna quote it anywhere. So again, I wonder if it's something to do with the accent. And as a Brit, I was like, no, I'd much rather go, your mother is a freaking aardvark, than do which we'll get to. I'm so pumped for that to come up as well. Yeah. So it's very famous character, very charming, very tiny interaction, but really stands out on his own. Like holds his own, like Lily Collins in The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Surrounded by real good actors, manages to hold her own. That's what this worm does in Labyrinth. Is that her name, Lily Collins? The model. No, not Lily Collins. Who am I thinking of? I'm sure she's called Lily Collins. Lily Cole. I knew who I meant.
Okay.
But yeah, and then Sarah does a line read that I always thought was like they only had time for one take and no one corrected her because she doesn't seem to have seen the like punctuation. Because where I'm sat from, he's like, come inside and have a nice cup of tea. And I feel what she should say is, no, thank you, but I've got to solve this labyrinth. But she says, no, thank you, but I've got to solve this labyrinth. And it doesn't quite work. It's like she saw no thank you and then a separate sentence of, but I've got to solve the labyrinth. But it feels like it should say, no, thank you, but I've got to solve the labyrinth. Just another comma in there. I don't know, it just always stands out to me as something a bit like jarring. But maybe that's the influence of the labyrinth.
You can tell it's a British worm, though, because whenever, as we're faced with a crisis, the first word you will ever hear is cup of tea.
Yeah.
So the fact that the worm is offering to make her a cup of tea is a very British response to a crisis.
And I think another reason why it's so famous and beloved is because that's very funny. It's like a worm that is clearly being operated by somebody's finger. Like, that's how small it is. It's like, come inside this tiny crack in the wall and my wife will fix you a cup of tea, which we can only assume, because they don't have limbs, is going to be like some sort of thimble. And then you start thinking, like, what, are they going to make it with their mouth? Like, wow. Like, it's just charming. It's very Monty Python, where you don't have to think about it, but you get the joke, because it's just funny. And then when you do think about it, it's even funnier, because then you start thinking of the logistics of Sarah coming in the crack in the wall for a cup of tea with these two worms that are the size of her fingers, and it's just like oh have a little thimble with the worm, little thimble full of tea.
I'm not going to doubt how they make the tea, because I've seen Todd Brownings's Freaks, and most memorably in that scene, the Caterpillar Man. There's a scene where these characters are just outside having a conversation, and the Caterpillar Man, who has no arms, no legs, rolls and lights a cigarette.
Oh, cool!
Just using his mouth.
Oh my god, that's so impressive.
I will send it over to you because it's a very famous clip. The guy himself had 9 kids. He was married with 9 kids. He's because when you look at Top Rank Freaks, it's like the creme de la creme of the sideshow circuit. You've got like Johnny Eck in there, and you've got all these like really famous sideshow performers, which again, it doesn't surprise me since Brannon came from like a circus background. And it's a shame. I mean, this is a film that was banned for many years. But no, it's a
which is quite interesting because doesn't it? It's in support of the performers. Like the villains are the people that the sort of able-bodied, beautiful people.
Yeah, because the trapeze artist Cleopatra is trying to kill off the dwarf ringmaster by teaming up with Hercules the strongman, and in the end, the so-called freaks and team up to take him down.
Sleep for weeks. It really there's something because American Horror Story Freak Show did a similar thing where I just cannot have like transformation in that way, like non-consensual transformation, and I don't mean like magical transformation. I mean like
you're talking about where someone is
someone's like turned someone into a chicken lady, and I'm like, oh my god, the dread, the fear, the like deep primal fear of falling asleep and having like my tongue forked, like, oh god, no. Like I
never made it through that season of American Horror Story. Much like most American Horror Story, I get like a partway through and it's like I'm bored now.
That's a shame.
But then Ryan Murphy's only good thing he ever did was Nip Tuck. But that's a whole other obsession.
I like American Horror Story.
I never questioned how they would make the tea. I questioned how Sarah would get in.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a tiny crack. And I'm sure there's... it's Never Ending Story, isn't it? Where there's a similar situation where Atreyu's got to get into a tiny building.
With the scientist. With his scientific speciality.
Again, more Cockneys.
I wouldn't have called him a Cockney. They were...
His wife, I definitely would. Because I think she was on EastEnders as well. Because I remember my mum always used to point out that she recognised the actress. So.
Oh, cool. That's what's really fun about the Neverending Story. I never really recognised the actors from anywhere. So I could really be like, they're just in the Neverending Story. They just live in Fantasia. Yeah. Like, that's who they are.
But no, the worm, it's definitely an interesting character. But like, when I come to thinking of my top characters of the Labyrinth, I never really sort of think, oh yeah, I must totally get the worm. I must represent William the Worm on my bookcase. It's like, no, I want to like, I think I even put like the false warnings above the worm.
Yeah, and maybe it's me making assumptions just from when you Google Labyrinth, like the worm is the thing that everyone's putting out on their Etsy pages and getting tattoos of, and because it's just simple and recognizable and cute. But same, like, I was always like, cute, I'm over it. Like, bring me that old man in his hat. Like, they're my faves. But yeah, and I literally... the first time I ever watched this movie, and again, like, we have another absolute magic moment where he's like, there's a opening right there, and you're like, you're with Sarah, you're like, that's just wall, worm. Like, I know you're small, got tiny little beady eyes, you might not be able to see properly. That's a wall worm.
Tiny little red eyes. I didn't realise how red they are until I...
This is what I'm saying. The design of the worm, when you start paying attention, is a little bit horrific. And I'm going to get so many comments on Instagram of people being like, stop the worm hate. And Jennifer Connelly walks towards this wall, and it's not a wall, it's an opening, and it's really happening. It's not CGI, it's there in front of you, and I know it's simple, but it just, the maths that would have been needed to like line that up to make it work in that way, as like a magic trick in that way, it just I'm just like, yes, more magic everywhere. And the music as well is like, bling! It's so exciting. It's so good. It's such a great start to our journey with this little like mentor character being like, and then, and I swear to God, I promise you, that worm is like, don't go that way. What was that? I said, don't go that way. She went, oh, okay, thanks. I went the other way. And before the little worm said anything, the first time I watched it, I was like, because I was like, obviously I was like so invested. And I was like, oh, I bet that way goes straight to the fucking castle. I bet that worm is just fucked up. And the worm goes, cool, if she'd have kept on going that way, she'd have gone straight to that castle. And at the time, I think I yelled at the TV. I was like, oh, worm, no. That's where we need to go, worm. Did you not read the script? And again, it's just one of those really fun, exciting moments where you're like, oh no, now we're going the long way round. It's just really, really fun. It's really engaging. And Sarah's happy. I'm happy. Everyone's happy. Worm's happy.
In the novelization, they do actually make it a little more clearer that the fact that the worm was trying to be helpful.
Yeah, but no, and I got that. I never took it as the worm was like a Judas where he's like,
Well, I know, it's just, as I said, it's they had a little more dialogue in the book, and it's sort of like, oh, I didn't want to go to that castle, dreadful place. So it's a real sort of emphasis is more sort of like directing away from danger.
Yeah, and I always took it as that. I was like, obviously this worm thinks she's trying to get out and avoid David Bowie. But, like, little does he know, that's exactly who we're trying to find. For more reasons than one. But he doesn't know that, poor thing. So he's like, oh, no, don't go that way, Sarah. Come on.
I should highlight my ignorance, really, for it. Because there was so many times I watched this as a kid and I never even twigged what the worm was saying, because I was so invested in just like getting on to the next thing. And then I was watching my gran one day and she's sort of like, oh no, that's where she wanted to go. I was like, oh right. Yeah. I never really like twigged on that piece of dialogue until she pointed it out, and it was like, how can I watch this movie like so many times and just be like, just completely miss this important piece of dialogue?
Yeah. Oh no, it's so good because it also sets you up as like the characters in the Labyrinth are going to be well-meaning but incredibly unhelpful. Whereas Hoggle is not well-meaning and incredibly unhelpful. Everyone else is going to sort of be like they're going to try and help Sarah, but fundamentally they're going to be like too dumb in a way to like actually help her. And it really establishes the aesthetic. It's a great introduction. It's magical. We've had some really great like moments of perspective and like just really cool stuff. So yeah, I really love these two scenes. I think they're really important, and I think they really stayed with me. Like I don't know if you're aware, I'm a big fan of Labyrinth. Like, every single minute of this movie, I can tell you why it's wonderful. Including bits that, like, may look like nothing much is happening. So much is happening. It's so good.
I just want to play a quick as-if game, or what-if game, should I say. Now, say Sarah had gone the right direction. She goes straight to the Goblin Castle. Mm-hmm. Do we think that she's just essentially doomed?
No.
Because in your head, you kind of like think, oh yeah, she'd go, and then she'd be able to get her brother back. But from obviously having seen the film numerous times, I would say that she'd be pretty much dead if she just strode up to the castle and took that shortcut and went straight there.
I don't think she'd be dead. I think she'd go up to the castle and David Bowie would be like, huh? What? Shit, fuck. Oh god, she's here already. How's my hair look? And then just cut straight to that end bit where he's all like, cool, well while you're here, I'm going to offer you everything. I don't think she'd be in danger, but she just wouldn't have learned any valuable lessons along the way, or friends.
I think that she would have been bumped off by the door troll. Because remember, she's got to get past that to get into the Goblin City. It's not the case of
because he said it goes straight to that castle. It doesn't go to the gates of the Goblin City. It goes straight to that castle. So I would imagine she comes up like through a paving slab into the like pit where Toby is. That's what I always assumed it would have done. And as I say, like, Jareth would have been there going like, you remind me of oh God, Sarah, what are you doing here? I thought you had like at least like 11 more hours. Oh shit, fuck, shit. That's what I think would happen. And she'd pick up Toby and be like, what the fuck, man? And he'd be like, did you learn valuable lessons? And she'd be like, no, take me home. And then he'd be like, oh.
But again, Jareth would have been able to defeat her because she wouldn't have like learned the mental strength to know that she does not need the Goblin King.
But she, like, not to skip ahead, she defeats him with stuff she already knows.
Yeah, but it's the strength she draws from her friends.
No, but her friends don't help her defeat him.
Yeah, but she has to overcome all these journeys, so she has to like play through.
Yeah, but she uses
what the play says.
The lines from the opening scene.
But she has to go through dangers untold. I battled my way here to get to the Goblin City.
Yeah, but she doesn't need to do that because she's got the lines. And maybe you're saying that she doesn't have the power behind the lines, and therefore they wouldn't work in the same way. But I don't know, man. Like, I think she'd be aight. And I think David Bowie would be so, like, taken off guard that he'd just be like, fucking go, this is embarrassing, just go. And then try and find another 16-year-old.
Possibly. You could read the fan fiction The Goblin Queen to find out how that went.
No, thank you.
We do have something very special coming up in a future episodes, so make sure that you look out for that. But anything else that you want to mention about these chapters, really? Because now we're obviously, we go through the magical door, so to speak, or just take a right, should I say? Was it left?
I guess it's right. If she's coming down that way, it was on the right-hand side of the wall. Which again is so clever because she has her little hissy fit where she like pushes against the wall, and she like obviously, but whatever, but like within the context of the labyrinth, she must be pushing like just to the left of the opening that she's desperate to find, which just makes it all the more like fun because you're like, oh Sarah, you even tried to do that and it didn't pay off, but you had to have the worm show you the way. Yeah, labyrinth.
But yeah, we're now obviously properly into the labyrinth. We're not in just the corridors. We're into the real, what people think the labyrinth is when you think of it. We also get to see Bowie's face in the cliffside, so take another drink if you're playing the drinking game.
There are like a million rules to the drinking game, by the way, not just like 3 or 4.
I just remember the Bowie in the landscape one, so every time Sarah has a hissy fit, have a drink.
I think it's more when she exclaims it's not fair as opposed to having a hissy fit.
So, and we obviously, when we're into the main bits of the labyrinth, we've got that wonderful signpost with all the hands pointing. And she looks out and she sees the Goblin Castle. And she hears Toby off in the distance and she's like, come on, feet. And then it sets off on her way again.
That's how every chapter opens and closes.
That's every time she sets off now. It's just
every time she pauses slightly to restart, she has to go, come on, feet. I love the little signpost with all the hands. Like, they're proper, like, hands that are, like, pointing. And, we get to see, like, a stone labyrinth. Like you're expecting, like, the Minotaur to be chilling down some corridor somewhere.
Well, this is what, when I think of the labyrinth, this is what the imagery that comes to mind. Mm-hmm. This particular layout, and obviously we're going to look at it a lot more over the coming chapters. Really, we're going to start looking at all the different bits included in it, because it's so ingrained in my mind when as soon as you mention like the labyrinth, it's always this particular area. It's not like where the fireys are. It's not the bog of eternal stench or the trash pile. It's just always this little section that I just think of when it's the labyrinth, and a little more when we get into like the garden areas. Just these areas which look like the one we're in now. Mm-hmm. That's what I think of when I think of the labyrinth. I don't know about yourself, but
yeah. No, I don't know. I think of I don't know. Depends. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what I think when I think of Labyrinth, other than like unadulterated adoration.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, I often actually forget this first part of the Labyrinth, and I go straight to the sort of more grassy bits, or like the junk heap, or like a bunch of different places, but never this bit because it's so near the beginning and she's there so briefly before we're entirely disrupted by one of the greatest scenes in this movie. So easy to forget, overshadowed, which we'll be talking about next week. Whoop whoop.
Yes, we will. So make sure you join us then. Anything else you want to talk about now, or?
No, I think that's all of my opinions.
You got it? Cool. So that brings us to the end of tonight's adventure. Make sure you join us next time for the first of our big musical numbers when we look at Magic Dance. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button where you have to listen to us. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram. We are posting many, many interesting bits of fan-related material from the film, so definitely go and check all that out. And, leave us a review wherever you happen to listen to us, as it all helps raise the profile of the show. But we will be back next time to talk about our next chapter, Magic Dance. But until then, thank you to my co-host Emily.
Whoop.
And thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back soon. Until then, good night.
Whee!